and I appreciate it every single day. Okay, so let me jump back. Let's look at code review. Let's talk about what we have here. When you get a new site and you download the code, let's go from there. So starting at the top, basically there's 4 folders. And you know what? This is all out of order. I don't know why, but we're going to reload it here just so that we get them in alphabetical order and all nice and neat. It's not a big problem to do that. We'll do it this way and okay. So now this is what you get when you download the file from GitHub. And if you haven't seen it yet, it's at github.com/http://walktheweb, and you can download this source right now. So, and you can load up your own site and you can play around with it. It's a 3D CMS. So, going forward, okay, so when you get the files, this is what you get. There's a web.config file and an htaccess file, just letting you know that that works. Basically, we're covered if you put it on a Windows server or if you put it on a Linux server. And okay, so in the config file, when you first get it, the only one you have of these files is this sample file. If we open that up, you can actually set your server IP and then port, and you can also do database name and user name and password, and you can set them here. You can also set where your content path and your, well, this path here, the content URL, right now, leave it where it's at because I think it'll break if we don't on a certain thing. Certain images aren't going to show up. I've got to go through and correct that yet. I noticed that this morning. So just letting you know. But there's a couple settings, default domain. Everything should start with 3D dot, just letting you know, so that we can be consistent and everybody can help find other 3D websites very easy just by the URL. Default site name, you can put whatever title you want to show up on your page when you go to it. And Google Analytics ID, this lets you track on your server level what you do. Then there's other Google Analytics IDs that you can set for 3D buildings, 3D scenes, and 3D things. So, and the default email from is just that, so you can have an email that it sends from. We'll do some more with the email settings as we add some more email functionality. Right now, that's not even tied to anything, so it's a placeholder for where we're heading. Okay, so this gets the basic file out here. And if you do not create one yourself, then basically it will create this wtw-config.php file in that same format with your data in it when you run the install. So the only thing you have to do is dump the files in the directory and actually run the install, and it'll create that connect file or the config file, and it'll do the rest for you. Now, the next part is connect. Connect directory are the JSON calls that bring back data into its own app. Right now, they're not extended out to any other servers because we're going to do this in stages on the releases of pieces as we perfect the security and make sure that it's all set and ready to go. So right now, I just wanted to get the 3D CMS out there so that we could get it working and that you have something to play around with and we can perfect it while I add the additional features to it as plugins. And you know, that's just where we're heading. Okay, so connect basically is the part that's going to let us from another server at some point reach out, grab data from this server like a building design or a thing that you put out there. Let's say you have a 3D shopping store. That's what's going to be able to reach out, grab that data, and then put it into their scene sitting on some other server on the internet. So connect is basically the exposure to other servers on the internet. That's what that sole purpose is. Now, it does have certain files with permissions that only let them read from its own source. So right now, everything's set that way, but we're going to loosen that grip as we set up and I release those other parts. Okay, so in here, there's a number of different types of files, which I'll talk about shortly. But you're going to see that they're kind of like action zones, and then buildings, we have avatars, community, and then connecting grids, the dashboard from the admin screens, molds, object animations, roles for your admin roles, sound. Then we have thing and all the things that you have, and we have uploads and upload media files and stuff that you may need to reach out and grab download. and then user and user access files type stuff, and then we have web aliases, and that's what we have. So that's the kind of information that we grabbed from that particular directory. Okay, moving forward, the content directory. The key about the content directory is, okay, I didn't put a copy of this file in there. There's two folders that you get. Let me show you on here, because what I did was this. You can move, like in that config file, you can move the path to your content directory, and you can move it someplace else. Now, the reason I did that is because, for example, when I do a search on the site and I'm working on it, I want that to work fast, so I don't want it to iterate through all of the avatar animations and also the graphics and different things that I have in the system level. So I left a copy of my plugins in the physical folder, but technically my site is designed to go to this directory as my actual upload folder. Okay, so this is what you actually get in your folder, and this is the active live one that I have. When you first get it, you'll have the plugins and the system folders. Plugins, this is a placeholder. I'm developing plugins right in front of you, and if you watch me, we'll keep on going with that, and it'll be released in the next release. That's my plan. Okay, so system folder. In this folder are the default things that I give you when you start the program, and it runs the interface. So it's everything from the menu icons to stock images that you have. Let's go through a couple of these. For animations, there's all the gestures, which happen to be all the extra when you have your avatar. Let me show you where. Since we've got this up and running here, let me kind of show you where we're going. Okay, so when you come in here, this is when, you know, let me see here. Let me go to a screen that I want it to move. I want it to move where I'm at. There you go. Now you can see where I'm talking about. Okay, so when you come down here and you, what was I going to do? I know, I just got to glance at that real quick. Oh, gestures. Okay, so when you come down here and you edit your profile and you edit your avatar, or if you click on this button here, these are the gesture movements. So every one of these possible animations that you can load are in that directory. If you select the animation, it opens up avatar settings, which is the same thing as going here and edit my avatar. So you bring these up. If you scroll to the bottom, the optional gestures, these are the ones that are stored in that directory. So you can add animation and you can just say, oh, okay, pick from that list, and you can pick anything you want to see. And it'll reload that. Oh, come on. It should reload that. And you'll get it down in here. And there it is. Wake up, guy. He didn't reload all the way. They didn't like some of the stuff I'm doing all at once, I think. But okay, it's not a problem. But yet, when you advertise, when you set him up, that's what he's going to have. And I can close that, and let me just refresh this page. It probably didn't like that I was in the middle of editing a box while doing that, because it may have overlapped something it's using or something. Because here he goes, now he's there, and we now have the head movement. He's nodding his head, yes. Okay, so we can add those extra things. And okay, yeah, animations it's easy to assign them here, and later on I'll show you how we can go from Blender and get animations and how we can actually put them in there and stuff. So I can give you some help on doing some of that stuff. We'll play around with it, and I'll show you how I grabbed them, where I grabbed them from, and there's some more animations that are available still that I didn't even take yet. So okay, on here, the other one is the movement. Now these ones are the actual ones that fall in. Okay, so when we went to the edit the profile avatar and we said avatar animations, like we have walk, and then we can pick which walk it is, all of these animations in animations movement fall under those categories. So any type of thing that you want to do. Okay, so you can pick from those different things. Okay, then we have, next is avatars. Here are the 10 avatars that come with the system. Female is the robot, male is the other robot, and underneath these have their default animations that everybody gets unless they change what they picked. There's certain ones that are default for male and female, and then there's certain ones that are specific to a female avatar, and then whatever they pick and customize gets added, changed out on top of that. Yep, it's all free. It's open source. You can get a copy of the code. I am going to be implementing this version that I have here on my site very shortly. So then you're going to be able to where I'll host it for you, and you're going to be able to play around with this exact same software. I just haven't had time to do it yet. As you can see, I've been a little busy this weekend. No, but okay. So then, coming in here. And okay, so with that, let's keep on moving on. Other than the avatars, I have a Babylon directory. This is some default different items that I've created that some of it's being used by our current system. Others are just having some options in the menu. For example, if I come in here and I'm building something and I go edit 3D building and edit web object and I pick that I want a Babylon file, well, what it's going to do is it's setting it up, but then I get to select which object I want it to load. And from these different items that are in here, let's pick a desk. So now what happens is we now have a desk loaded. And that's a very small desk, so we're going to make that bigger very quick. We'll just go to 3 and 3 by 3, and now we have a full-on desk. I can rotate it so that we can see the desk drawers. And as you see, this pulled something that was created in Blender and actually put into this app. So you can create objects in Blender. We'll go through that in future tutorials, but I'll show you how we can create something even with animation, put it in Blender, and then put it into our scenes. But notice all I have to do is select the Babylon object from my list, and that brings open the media library, which you can go directly to also. And then we can work with that particular object. So now we can move it around, rotate it, whatever we want to do. When we click Save, now it's in the scene. Notice this particular one. Let's see. I don't have the animations turned on this desk. Okay, we'll have to see about that. But basically, that desk is created in Blender and then put into here. So we can create our own things, we can tie animations to events, then we can play those events based on mouse clicks and different things. We have all kinds of options built in with that, but that does use these particular files. So I've given you a handful of ones that come with the system, and then there's some things like if you pick a video, play a video, I give you something that looks like a TV. That was created in Blender and then brought into here, and it's one of those Babylon files. In fact, it's the one called TV. That's the whole thing right there for you. Okay, the next one, icons. This has to do mostly with menu icon. Oh, no, I'm sorry. These icons are the different pictures that I've created so far to go along with the optional gestures. So as you can see, some of them are done and then all the rest of them default to this. This is play and animation. This is basically ones that I drew those by hand. I just went into Paint, threw them together and just quickly made an icon and stuff. I'll continue to do that, or if somebody else wants to do a bunch of animation or cool pictures or something for these, I'll definitely, throw them in here and stuff like that. So there's a challenge if anybody wants to go ahead and create a bunch of images. If you're a graphics artist and like to play around with that, we'll throw them in here and you'll be part of the project. So just putting it out there on the table so everybody knows. Okay, and that's where they are. System icons, you can see which ones I already have. And I named them, just so you know, if you go back into animations, gestures, they are the same name as the file without the .babylon or .babylon manifest. So I matched up the names. It looks to see if they exist, and then they work if you select that animation. Okay, so That takes care of that. And the next one is images. These are images used by the system. So here's all of our menu icons, for example. Different things that we have drawing the actual menu. We have other things in here. Just anything that the actual system uses as images during its use. So there's arrows, there's a little sound icon, there's 3D glasses PNG, you know, there's different stuff of things that I have in here. That's just whatever the system actually has as part of its stuff. Now, stock photos, these are the stock images, and there's one sound file here. And I don't think I threw in a video file in this directory. Actually, System Images has one video file in it, just so that when you open a video player, there's something in it. Okay, so those are that's where you find those, though, but that's all the stock images that come with the system. I'll be, at times, during times, we'll drop additional stock images for you and give you some updated things, and we'll play around with some of that stuff. These system items that are in here, basically that's stuff that I may throw new stuff out there every once in a while and add to it. Unless I warn you, I try not to overwrite existing things, only because if you want to customize something for your system, you should be allowed to if you're hosting it. So I'm trying not to, but I'm not making any promises that I won't occasionally need to update something in that system folder. Okay, so that takes care of and then uploads. When this folder, when you first get it, this folder isn't created. When you first install it, it creates this folder, and then during use, it may add additional things into the uploads folder. But I kept it really neat. Everything that comes from, if you download a new community or a building, each one of them have the actual community ID in this case, or the building ID, or the thing ID, so you can look and see what came with a particular building. If you want to know which item you're looking at, like this example, right now I brought open this web page and I'm working on this particular building. What I have is building ID in the URL equals and then that number up to there. What I would look for example, let me open the other one since I know it's there. Okay, select 3D building and let's open the Mountain Lodge. Okay, and so far I'm going to leave the viewer on the left side for a moment. But in here, the first thing I do is some of these scenes were backwards on the starting position. I haven't corrected that yet, but I will. That's on my to-do list. But basically, if you don't see something when you load it, turn around. And then once you do, all you have to do is go to Options Setting, Set Starting Position, and use Current Position wherever you're aiming. And that will record that position, and now every time we open this scene, it'll be there. Okay, but notice when I open something, I have building ID equals, and then this NM050 blah, blah, blah number. If I go into this directory, uploads, building, NM050 blah, 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 and if I go in there, these are the images, and there's some WAV files and different stuff that are used by this particular building. So everything that gets downloaded with that particular building that are assigned as part of it will show up here. So that gives you all those particular items. Let's see. We have two different buildings. This particular one just has the cement. It has, there's a couple things that were downloaded with it. We'll check into that later on, but that's some of the stuff that came with it. And we have one snapshot that ended up here that we'll double check why that ended up here. That's a cool feature too. Well, while I'm there, building snapshot. This is the picture that gets shown when you give somebody a URL to a building. So you can actually move yourself. If you detach yourself from the avatar, you can move anywhere you want to be to get the best perfect perspective on your screen of the image. And then when you do, all you have to do is say set default snapshot and it'll update that image for you. And the only reason I'm doing that right this second is because I want to see buildings. That, yes, it did update and it's in the root directory. That should have been in this subdirectory. I'll fix that in the code. There's a path wrong on that, but okay, that's why I wanted to see it. Okay, so we're coming in here. We have the things. Okay, so that takes us through that, the uploads. There will also be a directory if you or somebody that's working with you on your sites, if you upload something to the system, which means directly, if you're working on this building, for example, or you go to the media library or anything and you have my files and you click upload and you put another image on this screen, which, something I will just click on something just to do it. It adds the image that you did, and now you can select it and use it in your building. But when I do that, notice I now have a users directory. Users directory has also a number with it. When you see that number, first of all, I did not want a direct correlation between the user ID and the path ID, so I actually assigned a path ID to each user. So if we come into users and we go all users, one of the things is if I click on view user, I can see their upload path ID and it tells me it right here. So as an admin on the system, you can look that up and you can also, use that path to find out what that user has put in the system. Later on, I'll make it where you can search it and bring back a user based on that, but I just haven't had time to do that yet. Okay, so that's how the paths get written for the user stuff. And then once you know what user it is, it puts it in number directory so that you can do it over time. And it kind of gives you an idea of what was put there and when. Notice that it created 3 files, not just the one when I did it. I have the original file. I have one that fits in a 512 by 512 square, and it's proportional. And then I have one that becomes an icon, which is an 80 pixel square, and it fits in it scaled within it. So that created 3 images just by uploading 1 image. Web images get used basically by the system as an optimal view all the time. The original can be used on any object if you just select, when you're editing something, if I click on something, so I've selected something and I'm editing it. One of the options we have is show advanced options, and we have the option to force original graphic. So if you put an original with like 4K graphics and you really need the details to show on that item, let's say I put a wall-sized poster on the wall. 512 stretched out looks really ugly. But if I click that button, Force Original Graphics, it will automatically use my original graphic and it'll automatically take me to that scale. So every time that thing loads, it goes to that when they're on the optimal settings. Now, I do have to say when they're on the optimal settings, because this lets us balance out what gets shown at high level and not like blast everything out there on the highest levels that you can possibly have. Now, when I say that, one of the things in the interface is if I click down here, you can actually set your own graphic quality. Right in the middle means you get the balance of all the objects that are 512 basic graphics shown everywhere. That works just fine because notice on my screen right now, I'm a little ways back. 512 is a 10 by 10 cube of that wall. So 512 in a 10 by 10, I can take a piece of like that roof. That roof is like 40 tall. In fact, if I just click on it, we can tell right now. It is a total of, it's even longer than that. It's 104. There are 10 units going across this long distance here. Because of that long distance, every 10 by 10 square is only a 512 graphic. So look how big a 512 graphic is on the screen. It's about that big of what I'm looking at, and the pixels of the screen within that area don't even meet that amount. So it's not bad that you're using 512 the second you back away. Okay, so that's why we use 512 as a base. But if I go to higher, what it'll do is it'll force every graphic that you get on the scene to always use the original graphic, no matter what it is. If you go to lower, then it doesn't use this optional setting that lets you tell it to force original graphic. So it'll keep on that 512 graphic no matter what. If you have a slow computer, you may have to do that just to not load the big files that could be the originals. Okay, so I've tried to balance that out. The middle is the best quality. That's where we start everybody all the time. And then basically it's whatever you force the original graphic will show in the high quality. Tends to be really cool effect and work very well. So till that happens different, that's the way we're going to leave those. Okay, so now I've shown you where all the uploads are. That pretty much is our content folder. So these are the 4 folders that are going to be created in there. Actually, users is there. What did I do? Did I upload twice? Because my users are here. You know what? I'll double check the paths, but everything should be in the uploads folder. I tried to make sure that they were. I think what I did was I created the user and media, and I moved where the file goes, but I didn't change the default when it was creating those files. So I'll take that out of there so that we don't have that folder. I like to keep it nice and clean so that we only have these 3 folders in here. Anything that gets uploaded by use of the system, which is my stuff that I put in there as defaults and what you get when you get the product, and then plugins will be things that get updated along the way. I'm pointing this out in a particular reason. With the exception of updating WalkTheWeb code itself, everything you do when you use the system is in this content folder. So once you've installed it and you get past the install steps, then you can actually take this folder, you can move it to somewhere else on your server, and all you have to do is go into the config file, and I've got the samples, so I'm not going to bring up my actual one right now, but change this path for the content path, and as long as your permissions are set right on your server, then you can actually have those anywhere you want. So for security reasons, it doesn't physically have to be underneath that directory on your site. Okay, so that takes us past that piece, and let me go the next step. Okay, so now, I don't need to look from here anymore. That was just because we aren't showing the system directory from here. Okay, so the plugins directory, those will be updated as you do things. The next piece, okay, in the root directory, we basically have 2 files that actually browse. We have the index.php file, which is anybody that's browsing the site. And then we have, okay, and by the way, I'm going kind of fast through this stuff, so if you think of a question, chat it up, hit me on there. I'm watching it as I go. That's why you keep seeing my eyes kind of blink over that way as I see it move. I just want to let you know that, feel free to jump in and ask me something as we go. Otherwise, I'll just keep on plowing through this, okay? The one thing is, so the index file, the thing about that is it loads the minimum necessary for somebody who is browsing the site and using the site to do everything they need to do. The goal is to make sure that one stays as streamlined and as efficient as possible so that anybody can browse a site that's been created without needing a supercomputer to pull it off. Okay? Now, on the other hand, the admin file is where we go when it loads all of these scripts and everything else that we can use to administer a site. Now, keep in mind, when you administer a site, I let you do things like you can right-click on any object in the scene and it selects it and stuff. When you are in the regular mode, only the objects that are selectable can do that. And it's only if you click on them and then you tell it what you want it to do when you click on the box and stuff. That's the stuff we do through admin is we define all those things, but when they use it, then they come in there and they only have to run those particular pieces. So, it's just really cool that I only loaded the admin scripts, so that means if you're running a site and you want to administer it, well, then you might need a little bit more horsepower on your computer to pull off, everything. I tried to keep that well. In fact, I was using a 4K video card. I mean 4K. Sorry, if I had a 4K video card, I'd be back in the 80s. Okay, a 4 gig video card and 8 gig of RAM on the machine, and it handled it just fine. So admin can work just fine on that. So I just want to let you know, I designed it to work well. We're just going to continue working on making it more efficient in how it runs everything so that we keep lowering the standard of what you have to pull it off. Okay, so with all that stuff said, I do want to tell you this. Just a pause for a fraction of a second here, but Anybody that's with me today and anybody that's been with me before this, make sure you follow me because I'm going to friend each one of you, and the ones who are around the launch and the ones that help me the most from here going forward or anything like that. If you're here by today, then that's great. And if you follow me, I'll friend you. And that means if you have a problem or you need something of this program, then I'll give you special attention. I'll make you a higher priority to take care of your needs before others. I'm making you my key people. Now, there'll be others that I may throw in the mix because they're useful. They help people. They try to help others, or they're creating a really cool product, or it's in line with where I'm going in the first place, and stuff. So there'll be others that get thrown into that group. But anybody that has followed me by today, is going to automatically be included in that group. That if you need some, or let's say you're creating a plugin, you go, man, I need a hook that does this, or I need we need this functionality turned on, or if you add this code to the root code, then we get this extra stuff working, or we fix this, or whatever. I'm going to put you as a higher priority, and I'm going to take care of you. So make sure you followed me, and I'll friend you, and you can send the friend requests. I accept them all, so don't, at this point, and everything else. So now, with that said, so the admin file, if I load up these files, first of all, the index file, it pulls these basic things. Init session, we'll get to that file in a few minutes, but that's the init class. That's my class WTW, which is WalkTheWeb. I put a init session on there on that file name, just so you know that's where everything begins when you're browsing a site or even in the admin. These are the pieces that come from that file that tell it, like in the head, and it defines different pieces. We'll walk through those when I open up that file shortly. But until then, and then we have the main elements, and then we have the hidden fields, which is kind of how I pass information back and forth. I'll show you that design, and then we have the menu that you're seeing. The menu is this bottom menu. So it's not the admin menu, it's this bottom menu that you're seeing that it's running from here. Excuse me. Okay, so what we have, see how streamlined this is? I tried to keep it down where I don't load any more than I need to make somebody browse. I don't want to use too much overhead because I want as much overhead to go for the actual things you're viewing. Such as if you're in a scene and you're viewing a building or whatever, I wanted to give you as much resources as you can for every user to be able to walk around comfortably and move around and interact with the scenes. Okay, the admin, looking at the same thing, notice right from the start, there's additional stuff loaded. We have the init session, WTW class, just like we did before, but now we have the admin menu. We also have a plugin loader. This is the new piece that I'm building, so when you can do plugins, definitely when you do plugins, and just when you do plugins, you'll be able, this pulls them in at a certain level so that I know that they exist and that we are running the plugin loader, and we load things before the head of the document so that we can preload things if necessary, and we know it exists before we load the rest of the page. Then different things are going to be loaded in different hooks along the way. I'm going to be designing that exactly right in front of you on this computer, on the streaming as we go, so you're definitely going to be able to do that. The other thing is we have these different pieces. Load metadata, it's the same thing as the other one. We now have CS admin data because we have the CSS files that were part of the core. Think of it this way. Everything that index page did, this page also loads the same things. And now we're loading additional things for admin to be able to administer and use the site. Okay, so that breaks that down, and now we have the rest of this. There's certain JavaScripts that are only used in admin, and then through the pages, we throw our menu on the page. And we also have this full page form, which I want to show you is anytime you select a menu option in here, and it brings open this page that covers up your background stuff that we're seeing. This is the full page form, and a lot of other things use it, such as the media library. This is just a way to spill out data and be able to set settings as an admin. I try to avoid that, and I don't use anything like that when it comes to the user interface from a browse point of view, because I want the browse to stay clean on that side of things. Okay, this is a 3D CMS. So the same way that WordPress creates traditional websites, 3D CMS lets you create actual game components and actually drop them into game scenes. But it's in a way that as you're walking and stuff, it loads or unloads things, depends on where you are. So as you walk towards things, it loads them, and as you walk away, it unloads them. So it's a way to actually load game components. It's my own thing. It uses a Babylon engine behind it, but it is WalkTheWeb. It is my product. I've created this. I wrote it. And yesterday, I dropped it out there in open source. So if you look down below your screen there in the links on the bottom right corner, then there's a link that says GitHub, WalkTheWeb, download WalkTheWeb from GitHub. You can click that link, go right there, and you can actually download it and host it yourself. Otherwise, if you go to 3d.walktheweb.com, I have my own hosted version of it with a lot of test stuff in there, I have to say. The new one that I just released is a lot cleaner, and I'm going to be switching over my version to that version shortly. So, but I want to let you know you can play around in there. It's already hosted. It's all free. There's going to be optional upgrades along the way, but you're going to be able to do all the basics and the basic things you need for free. So, like I said, gave everybody a code as of yesterday. We dropped the open source out there. So this is an interface. And since I'm talking about this subject, let me connect with my avatar. One of the things is it really is in 3D. I can choose what camera view I'm looking through, but I can also choose what type of VR or 3D experience that I want to do. You want to learn to code? This is a great place because this tool does a lot of it for you to help you build things for games. And then on top of that, you can build plugins that add additional things to it. And we use Babylon code, we use JavaScript, we use PHP in the background, MySQL, everything that you have on your desktop. If you follow me and if you watch me stream, I'm teaching you how to do it as you do it. I actually have a doctorate in education. I am a teacher. I've taught programming at La Sierra University and Riverside Community College. I was the webmaster of the county of San Bernardino for over 10 years. I'm going to teach you how to code, and I'm going to show you how you can create things for this. And you'll even be able to make money by creating plugins that have premium upgrades that they can pay for. You give them something for free, and you give them some things that they can upgrade to. I'll teach you how to do all that stuff. Okay, so then we also have support for VR. Yay! We can actually bring this up in VR and use the goggles. We also have the default one for a game with the gamepad controller too. So there's more of these that I can add in here, and I'll do it as we release the more stuff with the product. But they have ones defined already for Babylon that are the Oculus and like 8 different brand names of the different VR sets. So I'll put them in here so that it custom uses exactly what they designed it to do. But we'll get that part in there. Okay, so let me jump back to the code. We're walking through the code right now. Those are the 2 core files. So index and then admin. Admin adds in all the extra pieces. Haven't released any games yet, but this is my unit for creating games and stuff, and you can actually create games as plugins. So instead of having to design a whole game from scratch, I already give you multi-user, I give you logins, I give you 10 different avatars to choose from, which we can expand on. I'm looking at making this Ready Player One, like I'm looking at doing the whole thing with this. But it already includes that stuff in the base site itself. So you already have the core for creating your own games. Then you only have to create, using the tool, you can build buildings, you can build any kind of scenery, you can set things up the way you want it to look, and then you can just add your custom code on top of that, and I'll even have ways that you can load your custom code through the plugins. I really appreciate you coming here and everything else, and I'm so grateful that you're here. But I like to teach. I love to teach. Let me rephrase that. And basically, I like to show you and talk you through it as I'm doing. So you're going to hear what I'm thinking when I see something and go, ooh, this could be a problem later on, and I'll make a note to check it again later. There'll be things that I do as I go, as I program. And you can watch me program all the time. I'm on here almost every day. But okay, moving forward, so we have these 2 files. An admin throws on all the admin tools that you would do if you're creating a site or a game or something else. Okay, so we have then the final product, or the final folder here, is the core. The core is my playground of how everything works. So the core, you should never have to actually change anything in the core. If you need something done in there and you see something and you go, hey, this right here needs to do this so I can make my plugin work or something, then hit me up for that, because I'll make the change in the core or make sure that we can accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. The core is the code that makes all of this stuff work. So like when you're walking and all of a sudden it loads something as you get closer, and you get closer yet and the details load, all that stuff is part of the core product. With that said, I have a number of pieces that are used to make this all work. First of all, you can see the directories, forms, functions, iframes, menus, pages, scripts, and styles. I did this on purpose, the way it's laid out, and I kept everything in their isolated folders just so that there's a lot of organization to how things sit. First of all, forms. Forms are what we see on the page. There's a concept here that I ran from start to finish, and that is, as you're doing things, this animated screen right here is always available, live, and animated. We use Babylon Engine behind the scenes, and this is using HTML5, and it's a canvas. So the idea is to not interrupt the canvas. So at any point, I can come over here and I can walk, and I can move around, and I can do all these things. I can interact with the screen. But everything I do, while that is to make sure that that gets constant animation and is always live while I'm doing everything else. No problem. We can hit up the ideas. We'll definitely take care of that. We can get you in there. And everybody else, chat if you have a question. Don't worry. I'll answer them as I go. I don't want to lose anybody. Okay, so the next part is here. Okay, so I'll get to that in a minute, but let me continue on this thought here. Okay, so this constant animation happens on the screen. That's what the user sees when they browse in 3D, which is WalkTheWeb. It's browsing in 3D. So everything else I do, I want to protect it from interrupting that animation. So if it's menu items down here, if it's clicking on something, interacting in a screen, if it's loading something or unloading something, all this stuff happens without interrupting, the actual screen. So by doing that, I created a number of forms. If I come in here, for example, communities, actually buildings, since we have a building loaded, if I go to options and settings and I select 3D building information, then what happens is this part up here in the top left corner right now is actually over here is forms, and it is building. This is where I have some things marked out right now because it's some future upgrades I'm working on. But building name, for example, Google Analytics ID, and then under the advanced, we have an alt tag. So if we look on the page, there's our building name, there's our Google Analytics ID, and if I open this up, there's our alt tag. And in this case, it's not defined, but don't worry. Okay, so that's where these forms are. So the forms show up in different parts of the page. If I right-click on something, then I'm bringing up the form for the molds, which is right here, mold form. Now, this file has a lot of things. Depending on what you're trying to edit, it'll show or hide things when it opens, but basically this is where all the information is that is part of that mold edit, okay? So each one of these forms are opened within that menu, and they show different things based on what menu items you've selected or what items you've selected in your screen. Just so you know also, I'm right-clicking on this scene, and it'll automatically pick whatever I click on so that you can edit that particular item. Okay, I'm clicking on this and it's catching the glass up front. Okay, but so I can basically move around and I can catch different things and I can click on them. When you're working on things also, you can click on certain items, and if you click a second time, it tries to drill down and click on something that's behind it. So I do have some layering attempts, to try to grab items that are sitting behind another item. Okay, so let's see, let's keep on moving forward. And so those are the forms. And then next we have functions. What I did was I took all the PHP functions. These are the interaction with the database for the most part. They're the interaction between what I do from JavaScript to what I do in the background to set things in the database or to pull information or to use the PHP session or anything else that happens on that level. This is where I do that information. Now, there's a couple of them that I want to point out. First of all, WTW session, that's the one we started with when we were looking at like index PHP page. This class WTW is that particular class. It comes in as WTW when you initiate the class. So everything that's being called by WTW, then hyphen, greater than sign, and then something is a function or a variable that is passed by this particular piece, which means that every one of these variables in the top here and these functions that are set for public are all available from anything that you're browsing. For example, this particular one, WTW, WalkTheWeb, is available from everywhere that you go. So when we run this sequence, not only am I defining the function, but if you look at the bottom of this page, whoops, scroll that all the way down. The next piece is, let me move I'm going to move the viewer so that I'm not blocking your view here. There we go. Okay, so down on the bottom left here, we have the functions that it executes when it loads up. So it checks the host and finds out what sets a number of variables. It gets the domain info for the one site that you're trying to find. And then it does a check of the database, which is also checking if it needs to be installed and making sure all the pieces are there that it needs, like the config file. That's where it does all of the crunching and setup processes. And then, oh, here's the link. If you go to this lets you try the site and let's see, github.com/http3d/walktheweb. And that's where you can download the code and actually use it on your own servers and stuff. Okay, so check database is all about the installation process and making sure that everything's there that it needs to run. The next part is it does a track page view, so we are actually, if anybody that's using the site, boom, it actually goes to Google Analytics if you've set one. And then check web is a beginning process, finishes the startup to set your first positions and all kinds of goodies in there. Okay, so that takes us through a init session. There's this file and then two other files that are on this class of files. This one is used by anything you browse. So WTW is the main one for anybody browsing a site or admin browsing a site. The next one is, I'm just going to jump down here. The next one is, there's a connect one. This one is used by all of the items in the connect folder. So when I talked about these items that use JSON and make calls and stuff, every one of these are designed to use just this connect object. So even though I have more classes in the background, what I did in this object was I wanted to simplify. One of the things that's kind of a pet peeve of mine is I want you to have everything at your hands when you want to create something. So if you're creating a connect file in your plugin, then basically all you have to do is include this connect class, and basically from there on forward, all you have to do is call the connect class to get to everything else. So when you look at the connect class, not only do I have different properties and things that you can grab values from, but I also have things that pass other places. So like if you want to report an error or if you want to do a query to the database, each one of these are in, for example, the WalkTheWeb database class. But all you have to do when you're using this stuff is say WTW query. So everything else WTW connect. Everything in this file is only of that one class. You don't have to know in your mind, you don't have to go, oh shoot, was it in the database class, or was it in the WTW class, or was it in the user class, or the whatever? You don't have to worry about any of that stuff because I'm actually taking you where you need to go right in this class, because I redirect the queries behind the scenes and the random string and all these different functions to the proper classes that they need to go to perform that item. So when you create something that needs to go, give information out of the database and retrieve it as JSON files, here's the format you use. And basically you can create files and do whatever you need to with them. Okay, and we just have to include one class. The same idea happens with, I have iframes, and I'm going to explain why I have iframes shortly. We're almost at that directory, but beyond these functions, there's another one called WTW iframes. Same thing happens with those. So these classes kind of stand on their own. WTW is anything you're browsing. Iframes is anything that comes up in an iframe that helps us interface with the database while we're live. And then the connect are all the JSON calls that happen that way. Okay, so from here, what we have is this particular class does the same type of thing as the connect class. There are a bunch of functions that are going to pull from different places, but if you have to create an iframe page, you're only going to need two classes. One, the iframes class, which is this one, and then from there, the only other class you're going to need is dependent on what you're trying to do. For example, this one has the iframes class, which does track page view, and it does error catching, and we can also do queries on the database or whatever we want to write into the code here. And then I created separate classes for each thing that I want to interface with. So buildings iframe page has a buildings class that will automatically do all the functions that iframes page can do. So they all connect. Now, let me move here. Let's go through just a couple more classes before we stop. So each of the rest of these classes in here all are for particular either iframes or they're a particular thing. For example, we have a user class that is nothing more than an information of the different pieces so that we know we've set these through different things, but you can call user and you can actually get user information from that. The other ones are, let's see, I'm building a plugin class that'll work just like the iframes and connect class, but it'll be if you're creating a plugin, all you have to do is use this plugins class and it'll get you the information you need and connect you to the different things that are common that you'll need. So then you just use that one class and you can extend out all these other classes that you need into that one piece that are common. Okay, so the other one that's in here is admin menu. This is one class that has all the objects that actually make up the admin menu. So, for example, we have dashboard, then we have media library, we have 3D, my 3D communities. Notice that is the root level of this menu in here, and it's built dynamically, which means I've already set that up so that the plugins can add menu items. So we'll get there. We'll get there. I'm going to put in all the hooks. I'm going to make sure the code's set up in a way, that you can actually add things to the menus where you need them, add them to the code where you need them, make them load when you need them to, everything else. I'll take you through those pieces. And what's going to happen is some of you out there are going to become plugin designers that are going to end up with worldwide games because everybody that downloads this thing for free will have the platform to run your plugin. That's the idea. We bring it all together. We all use the same platform. There's a standard across the board, and then we build these plugins and go. Okay, so now back to the code. So that's the admin one. Menus one actually runs some things behind the lower menu. That's all created dynamically, so we do have the option of placing things in or out of that code too. And then, let's see, the rest of these are pretty standard. Each one pairs up with a particular iframes page. I named them the same thing, so if you're in the action zones page, it's WTW action zones for the functions. And I tried to keep them very, very clean back and forth so you know where to go. So let's move on to iframes. the reason for doing iframes. A bunch of people go, no, JSON calls do HTTP or XML HTTP requests and all this other stuff, right? I did those on everything that I could. But what I noticed was that there's times when certain things have to be offloaded from the current document in order to not break the animation. For example, when I upload a file, if I use the button, no matter what I tried to do, if I use the button on the screen and it was integrated into the same document model, in other words, without an iframe, as the page running the animation, no matter what I did, it would pause the animation. It may not be on the smallest files because it'd be almost undetectable. But second you did a little bit larger file, all of a sudden he'd be walking and all of a sudden, okay, and you could just see when it paused and it got it lagged. It lagged. We don't like lags. Gamers don't like lags. That's when you lose half your audience. So what I did was I actually created dynamically built iframes. We don't have the iframes on the page. We actually are, when you need it, in admin. This is only in admin also. This is not something you do when you're browsing a site. This is something you do when you're using the site. With the exception of, I do dynamic iframes for tracking your page views, and I'll show you why later. But that's a reason. But other than that, this is only used in the admin tools. So what happens is this. Let me talk you through the process. You're editing something. So we've got a form up here. So remember from our page, these are our forms right here. So we broke open this mold form, for example. And we fill in these values, we work with it. Notice if I move something, it's moving what's happening in the scene. So we have this stuff going on, okay? Then, when I come down here and I say, save this box, or I say delete this box, if I say cancel, it just goes back to where it was. But if I say save or delete, then it takes that information, and let me get an example here where it's happening. Let me just, okay, I found the one place that doesn't work like that. Okay, this is a good example. What happens is this. First of all, I set a request variable and I assign all the values from the form, because the second you click save or delete, I clear those forms for the next user. And so I don't want to interrupt the process and make you wait for this to be submitted, which would then pause your animation or cause other issues. So what I'm actually doing is I'm setting them as a local variable, and then I pass them into the onload function of an iframe. So I tell it what iframe page to call, and then I tell it these are the values that I'm feeding onto that page when they go, and here's the button that I'm going to click. Okay, so I'm passing values to the iframe after the page loads, which is this page, and then I pass the values on there, then I tell it to click this particular button on that page. When it completes that process, let's go to one of the pages. So let me open up, well, this one's connecting grids. Let's just go there for a second. And on the connecting grids page, what we do is we load up the page. All it has is a bunch of these values, and then it has buttons. The buttons themselves are tied to, when you click a button, it will know which button, by this button value thing I use, it will know that it's been posted, and then it'll select the button that you clicked and then run whatever function out of our classes that you tied it to. When it finishes that function, it does the return trip on this page, because it's a postback, just like any other posting form. It grabs these values on the bottom, which is done through JavaScript, and notice this only exists, the Windows onload, to run this on the postback. So we get those particular buttons that were clicked, we run the process with the class, then we pass it back to a function back in the JavaScript on the main page, and following that, it runs this remove iframe on the main page, which kills the whole iframe and cleans itself off. So what happens is you can actually send something to the database, and you can continue on your way on the scene or on building things or whatever you want to do. It comes back and it intercepts it when it needs to, and it can actually pass completed values back to the screen or circumstances or whatever you need to know, and you can tell it to run something on the reply back. So, very cool, huh? Okay, so we've designed it that way, and we have a number of different iframes based on what you need to do at different times. Each one has a class associated with it. So that's what iframes are used for. Mainly what got me on that path has to do with file uploads. They were causing the most problem with interrupting the scenes. Okay, menu screen. This is really straightforward. Here's the menu on the bottom of the page. This class menu, when it runs, get main menu. That's the database driven part of it, which is the whole piece across the bottom and what you're clicking on and what it tells it to do. And then I have certain menu things that if you click on it, these parts open up. So notice this first one here, I have it remarked out right now because I've got to do some more setting up on the back end for them. But you see VR, yes you do. Notice Oculus, Vive, Windows, WebVR, Gear VR, Daydream, generic. We have all these different options is available from Babylon. And all I'm doing is extending those camera views onto you. So that's not too much trouble to get there. Okay, so these are the different parts that pop up when you click on the menu. And notice those are these menus down here. So any one of these, this is the HTML that you're actually seeing. Okay, and the same thing happens with our admin menu. That's our page for that. Has basically anything that pops up as you click on a menu item. Remember the menu, the root menu is dynamic. These are the parts that are shown after something's clicked. So it's just extra stuff that are shown. Okay, now moving from there. Pages. These are actually just HTML pages. They show up in different times and different things, like if the person doesn't have permissions or if a help screen gets clicked on. These are just little quick things. They're actual full pages that show up into iframes or something as needed. Then we have scripts. We also have styles. There's a core style, which is used by everything. Help is only used by the help page. Install is only used by the install process. But core is the one that gets used with the index PHP page and admin, so it's used by both. Admin is only used by the admin PHP page. Catch that? It's about as straightforward as it gets. And we have one shader right now. The water has a shader function, so that's in here too. It just seemed like the right place to put it. Now scripts. Scripts is the core of what we're doing. Okay? I have it divided by some really important areas. The scripts themselves, each one has particular functions, and I tried to divide them based on those particular functions for the most part. I'm going to kind of start from bottom to top. Well, I'm going to pick out a couple first. Prime, these are the core scripts that make 3D browsing work. This is the brains behind everything else that you see. This is the core that I wrote to make all this stuff actually work. Okay, with that said, when you're coding and you want to know something about the JavaScript side, first thing is there's a constructor file, which is the initiation of the WTW class. And if you look at the bottom of the page, notice it starts WTW class, and it is this up here that it's running to do it. These are your variables of the different things that we have on a global scale. So if you want to use them in your JavaScript, you look at capital WTW dot and then any one of these names. You can use these items. They're throughout their global variables. Okay, and notice a couple I'm going to point out is we have communities, buildings, and things. So if there's more than one loaded at the time, we got an array of all the values that are loaded. There's also community molds, building molds, and thing molds. So the items that were used to create a building, a thing, a community, all of those are in classes. We have connecting grids and we have action zones. So those are two important pieces. Let me scope this out for you. This is kind of an important piece to how all the JavaScript stuff works. When you open a scene, the first thing is connecting grids are the pinpoints on the map telling it where to originate something. Okay? These are the pinpoints. Now, I've set it up where you can walk into an area and other pinpoints will show up. So it adds more as you go. But basically, these connecting grids are the locations where you're going to place something. So the first connecting grid you load is going to be your scene connecting grid. Boom, this is where my scene is 0, 0, 0. Now it builds the scene around it. So your 3D community is loaded. Then you'll have connecting grids define the different pieces. Let me show you what they actually look like in the database, because this is kind of a real core piece here that we need to show off. Let me go in the right database here. Okay, so connecting grids, here's what they look like. It is all about parent-child relationships. So the connecting grid has an ID, but then notice there's a parent ID and we tell you what it is, and then there's a child ID and we tell you what it is. The ones that don't have parents are the core items themselves. For example, we have one community and it's KVR, this is the ID of that community. It matches in the other thing. So then, after that one, then we have a building here, we have a thing here, and we have a building here. Those are the core items that are created to be standalone objects. When I load this community, what happens is it not only loads the community, but it looks in here and goes, oh, the community as a child is, I'm loading this community, but then I look where it's a parent and I say, oh, this parent, there's a community here, and now this building with this object ID is in this community. Now I know, place the connecting grid, which is a 1 by 1 by 1 cube, at the location where the building is in relation to the center of the community. Now I know where that building is going to exist. Then from there, here's those values that we set. So when I come in here, let me show you what I'm actually talking about. That particular one, we are going to select our community. And in this community, we have a building. If I select this building, I am now editing the location of this community. Notice it's at 005.5. If I look in the database, that building in this community is 005.5. It's scaled to 1, 1, 1, and it's rotated at 0, -90, and 0 to be in that exact position. So let's look. We are at -90 rotation. We're at 1, 1, 1 scale. If I change this here, let's say we want some big place. We're now at a 2 by 2 by 2 building, and let me get off the front steps and back up just so you can kind of see that it has now doubled in scale within this community. That's when I save this building. Now, if I refresh this page, now I'm at 2, 2, 2 for the scale of that particular building. This is the connecting grid that defines how to place that building into that community. It also shows how to place things into buildings and things into communities. So it has that dynamic of the relationship between the items. There's some other fields here, like a good example, what load zone. I'll be talking about load zones next, and that's going to be a very important key to how we do things. So for starters, what we did was we have the building community, or we have the connecting grids. So now we know on a 1 by 1 by 1 box where it's going to be placed. Now, just so you know, the building itself, when I add it to a scene, it actually parents to that 1 by 1 by 1 connecting grid. If I rescale the connecting grid, like I did here, to 2 by 2 by 2, that box scales everything that's a child of it, which means the whole building. And if there's things in the building, they would also scale because it's retroactive to everything that's parented to that cube. That's why I did the cube parenting. I can also take that box, and when I rotate it, the whole building rotates. If I position it different, the whole building moves. And we can see that just by if I right click on the building, and now if I move the building, look, we're lifting the building. If I rotate the building, I'm rotating the building. I can rotate it in more than one direction. I can create anything I want and set it in any relationship I want to the item I have. So let's say you put a building in there and somebody else changes their building and scales it and goes a little bit too big for you. You need it to be 1 foot shorter and it would have fit. Well, guess what? You can be 1 foot shorter. All you do is go in here and we fine tune it. I'm going to get us back to 0, 0 on the rotation. You can also, instead of pushing the buttons, you can also type values into these fields. And when you remove the focus, so you click on anything else, that's when it sets the values. So it's real easy to work with. Okay, so we want to make our building just a little narrower. All I have to do is take the one value and shrink it just a little bit. And guess what? I'm still working because, hey, it still kind of fits in my place, but I adjusted it. It's distorted just slightly, but it's enough to make it work in my place. Now it fits in my community. So we have that option, we have that ability of how we place things in items. And guess what? Here's a really cool feature. Let's say I wanted to see the dollhouse version of this. I can put this whole building as is on a table in a scene. Now notice it disappeared. Those are action zones. I'll show you about those shortly. But notice when my guy walks over here, I'll grab it I'll hit the run button. If you hold down shift, you can run. But notice when I get close enough, now the building exists because I shrunk the action zones, the load zones with the building itself. But notice it is a full replica. It is the original building. So you can scale things, and this has to do with connecting grids. That's the importance of connecting grids. It's how we add things to a scene and their relationship to the original scene. Okay, so for now, I'm going to cancel, because of course I don't need a 1 by 1 by 1, and that automatically put it back to its full scale. And as I start to walk, I'll come up out of the ground. And now we're back to, this particular one is now 2 by 2 by 2, so I'm in the giant household. Okay. And so that's connecting grids. The next really important part are action zones. Let me scale this building back to 1 by 1 by 1 because I want you to see where they actually exist. You know what? Actually, I'm going to go to 0.75 because I want to make sure I can get to some of the faraway ones. You know what? I got a better idea. I'm going to set this to 1 by 1 by 1, and I'm going to, well, yeah, let's go to 1 by 1 by 1. I've got a plan here. Okay, let's save this building. Let's go to here. Now, action zones are the second part. We have connecting grids, and now we have action zones. We'll get to more of this code in here in just a minute, but let's talk about action zones. Action zones, I have my connecting grid, and that's my little square of where something's going to be placed. But now we need to know when it loads something. So what I did was I created by default 3 what I call load zones that are around this particular point that go out to different degrees. Let me show you in our scene here. I'm going to click this button. See how it says zones off? Click this button. I'm going to click it. You got to be outside the zone to see them because they're invisible from inside. But when I click it, notice that we can now see this cube around the box. See, there's the edge of the cube, and it goes all the way up. It's pretty high up here. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to detach from my avatar so I can move a little faster and easier. I don't need to, I looked up the avatar's nose. Okay, back off from it. Okay, see how this big zone is a big old box that's right there. What happens is when I walk into that zone, now the camera by itself doesn't do it, but when I walk into the zone with the avatar, I detect that I'm inside of that invisible box and it triggers to go see if there's anything it needs to load. Now in this case, it's 3D browsing. So what it actually does is it goes and looks out on the internet wherever this site is hosted, or this building, for example. It gets the data that it needs, brings it back, and then loads it to your scene. So you are 3D browsing. You're grabbing it from the internet. It doesn't have to be your local machine. Even though what I've released so far uses it from its own machine, only because we're not ready to release that yet. I'm going to make sure the security's set so that we have it the way we want it and only expose the pieces that we need to. So don't worry, it's coming probably in the next release. I'll have that piece in place. But for now, okay, so notice there's that big box, and that's a load zone. Also, around the door, notice there's this box. That one is a different action zone. When you walk inside of that one, I tell it to open the door. So it triggers an action. In this case, it's revolve a piece and move it a certain distance and stop. Then when I'm out of the box, it closes back up. I also have sliding doors, like sliding glass doors. I also have, you can move a box. You can move an object. You can move a group of objects. So if you have a door with all these parts on it, you can tell it and make it do all those things. That'll be future lessons when I show you how to use them, and I'll do some specific ones where I say, today we're talking about action zones, and I'm going to dive in and show you all the action zones. But in this particular case, I just want to show you. So we right now have what we call a load zone. I create 3 load zones by default. The first one, I call it extreme load zones. And notice, okay, in here, add action zones, it will show you the zones. Right now it's not showing. I don't show you the default ones because you can't change them. You can't add to them or do anything. There's 3 default ones. If we add another zone, we can add a load zone, a sliding door, a swinging door, click to activate a sliding door, and also rotating. We can add those right now. I have different things that we do that you can do. I'll be releasing more of that stuff as we go. I just wanted it to be a simple package to start with. Okay, so, but these particular types, if I connect to my avatar now, so I'm going to retie onto the avatar with the camera. Now I'm moving the avatar, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk inside this zone. Watch the building. And now it starts loading anything that's related to that building. And it does not stop what I'm doing. And if I get too far away from this building, let's say I'm walking away, it gets rid of them and it cleans out the scene. This is what makes it 3D browsing, because you have the option to add things as you get close and take things away as you go farther away. That means we can build big scenes. We can have some where you see the A-frame of the building from a distance and you go, ooh, there's something over there. I want to go check that out. So you walk towards it. That's the extreme zone. That one shows at quite a distance away from it so that you can always catch it. This is the details one, where when you walk inside it, you're close enough to the building, I should see the details on the outside of the building and be able to interface with them. That's your window shopping. That's your, details of the outside of the building to make it look really cool. Then there's a third zone that when you go inside the building, it can actually load different things inside the building that you'd only want to see if you actually entered the building. Then you can add, in addition, those are the 3 default ones that I give you for any community, building, or thing. But then I give you the option to create and add your own areas. So you can define the box where it is, and when you walk inside it, you can tie certain objects. Each object that we edit. If I click on an object here, this stairway, I just grabbed, actually I grabbed the box underneath it. Let's grab, come on, where am I grabbing? I don't know what I'm grabbing right now. Let's refresh the screen. It didn't like that I have the building location set right now. It's okay. I could have closed that. It would have done the same thing, but I just want to make sure we got this here. Okay, so when I'm in this scene and I click on something, for example, okay, I grab this piece over here. When I grab something, that grabbed the lodge. I don't want to grab the lodge. Okay, we're going to grab the piece underneath it for now. And I come down to show advanced options. I get the option of telling it when to load that object. We can be in the extreme zone. We can be in the normal, which is, our high is the second one. High is when you're outside the building and you're going to do window shopping. Or normal is when you're going to enter the building or just before you enter the building, what it's going to load when you're that close to it. Those are the three I give you. But let's say you're going to walk in another room and I want to load those objects only if you're going to walk in that room, then I can create a custom one. It'll show up on this list as soon as you create that item and you define where it's at. Now you can take objects and select which ones you want to be inside of that zone. Once they're inside that zone, when you walk in that area, those are the objects that'll load. Okay, so that becomes a very important part in balancing out your scenes and telling it not to load too much until you actually need them. So action zones are about those core pieces. We want to know when you're in an area and we need to provide an action, or you're in an area that we need to load something. So in this particular case, if I show my zones again, there's a zone around the door. Watch what happens as soon as I walk inside the door. This particular one, I'm going to go to a walk here, and as soon as I go in, it opens the door. Notice that the door itself is, because I'm showing the action zone, there's an important piece you can see here. First of all, the door has a handle on it. That's a second piece. I'm moving more than one piece with this action zone. The other part is when I edit something, I can actually see the axis that it's going to turn on. If it's a movement, I can set the movement and show how far it's going to move. And it'll show me the axis to show which direction it's going to move and different things. When I walk out of it, notice it automatically closes the door. That's how I'm pulling off those things. I'm detecting if your avatar is inside of an action zone and then telling it based on what kind of action zone what to do. That's a very key component to building sites because you need to know what you want to build and where. Okay, so let me go back into the code. Okay, so those are action zones. Now, the primary files, let me finish going through these real quick. We have the constructor, which is our object of the WTW. Then each one of these scripts that are up here all add to that object. So any one of these can be called with WTW dot and then the objects and stuff. It's all capital WTW. Only because I did a lowercase WTW whenever I was working with the PHP and I wanted at a glance to be able to see the difference. But I wanted to keep it simple. Okay, so for these items, the next important one is object definitions. If you look in here, you can find each one of these objects, like connecting grid that we just saw. This is the format of the connecting grid that we're seeing. So every time we have one, we create new connecting grid, and this is the layout of the object model that is under JavaScript. You can also see, if we look up here, you can go to connect, and we can actually go to connecting grid right here, and notice the object model is created in the same format. Let me get past the SQL statement that pulls the information we want. And notice community info, and then here's the fields underneath that. If you go to object model, community info, and here's the objects that fall underneath it. And the same thing happens with each one of these sections. It'll tell you the different pieces, and it shows you the layout. And then, of course, those are all the sub areas, and then this is the actual item. And here's all the root level items in it. So you can actually see it from the connect part, or you can check it from the object definitions. Either one, every time I add something or change something, I'll add it in here so that you always know the current object model. Then you know, hey, if I need a connecting grid, when I look into the connecting grids object, for example, connecting grids here, and I get the array, I can cycle through the array, and I know if I go the array, community info / community name, I can find out the community name. Same thing for building name if it's a building, thing name if it's a thing. I can grab the rotation. I can grab alt tag, which is part of working on setting up some things that we can actually make this ADA compliant at some point in time. So we have these different things. Here's a new mold. Now, you saw the word mold. Okay. Babylon creates meshes. Meshes are currently loaded objects in your scene. I created molds and purposely did not call it the same thing because a mold is the wrapper. It includes the mesh when it's created, but it also includes the definition of what's going to get created when it's not. So the mold is what I have, and I'm tracking it at my level to decide if I'm building the mesh or not. So it's the wrapper. In the same way that I did that, we have materials, which are the Babylon term for creating what you're going to wrap around a mesh. I have coverings, which are the wrapper for everything for the material when it gets created, because I needed a way to define them when they don't exist currently on your screen. That's how I can decide when to load them and when not to. So you'll find the different things in here. There's everything in here, including path points and new avatar definitions of what you would need to create to do your own avatars, and what I track when I load them and how I drop them out, and all the different object models. And you can find all the definitions of all that stuff in here in WTW_object definitions. So we have constructor, object definitions. The next part is init. This is where you're going to find all the init events. You're going to find all the event listeners. You're going to find how it loads up JavaScript from startup on Windows Onload. This is where it looks for certain pieces and runs. That's where I define things like window on resize and stuff. So we can definitely work with that. Then we have a couple of these things like the install. All of the install processes are in here, and this is a light JavaScript that kind of has exactly what it needs for the install. Input, here's touch, mouse pointer, keyboard strokes, all kinds of catching points in here, and it shows you what events they trigger, what things they start. If you have certain functions tied to those events, you can all find them through the input button. Okay, when you get all this stuff into place, it starts running. The key is this core file. Starting up with init load sequence, here is the initialization. It starts with set some values, and then it runs init environment, which is in order on this page. This and then these right here all take you down the process. This core file is the core running file. I say that in a very specific way. It's the loading up the environment based on what we pulled from PHP on the startup. It is the sequence that it runs when it runs stuff and loads them in. It includes some things before it loads the scene. It includes loading the scene, and then it has some things that get added afterwards. It also has a user canvas that we have a canvas that sits in front of the other canvas that we can actually do things with just with straight canvas programming to put things on it when needed. Then we have loading the scene itself, and then we have loading user settings after the engine is already loaded. Okay, that's a very important sequence of events in that particular order. In this file, you will also find the render loop. So if you're used to Babylon, render, we have the render loop. Okay, let's see, start render, and let's see, stop render and a start render. I do have a stop render in place, and that is if you sit idle for too long, and when you're on the desktop, it's a long time. When you're in an iPhone or something, when you're in a cell phone, it's actually a very short time. And basically, it'll start or stop the engine so that we can, run it from there. We can actually take it and pause it so that it's not running when it's not active. Okay, so here's this render loop, which if you're used to doing stuff, that's the stuff that goes. There's a number of things in there. Check action zones is a key function that you'll find in here. It runs once every loop, and it's checking to see if the avatar has collided with or is inside of any one of those action zones. That's why I talked about those first before showing you this. There's a multi-person in action zone. The reason for this is if you're in a scene and there's more than one person and they go to walk through a door, you need to know that door needs to be open because you saw them walk through the door. You don't want to see them walk through a closed door. So it actually triggers the items for multi-person in action zone. We've set the closest building so that we always know what's closest. That particular thing is in the bottom right corner here. If I show this compass, let me move my screen to the other side real quick. There. Okay, if I show this compass, which I just went to settings and I get the option of compass is visible. There's also a mode count, FPS and stuff. You can use those things too. But notice the red arrow. When I move around and I walk or turn or do whatever, the arrow will always show me the closest building, and that ties directly to what it says down here. So as you're walking around, it's telling you, I'm on the community, small island 3D community, because that's what I called it by name, which, by the way, your names are in options, community information, whatever is here shows down here for the person when they're browsing it. So little key information. Same thing for building and things. Okay, so it tells me 3D Mountain Lodge is the closest item because it's pointed in red. And as I'm walking around, if there's something else in this scene, then what happens is that arrow will change and this item down here will change to show me what I'm closest to. So it's always identifying what you're closest to, your position to the center of the thing that you're walking up to. So if it's really big, you could be closer to something across the street than you are to the center of a building that's really big, just to let you know. But it's always going to be to whatever's the closest item based on the center of its objects. Now, instead of building this huge, great, big building, sometimes it's better to build it in chunks and actually have a building, and here's a part of the building as this building. Now here's another part as a second building. Add them together in the community level. That kind of gives you a little bit more control over how you do things. Okay, just giving you a hint. Okay, so let's go with, go back into here. So it gets closest building, and we have a few other things in here. At the bottom of this file is our actual avatar movement. Just letting you know, this is the thing that tells it what the avatar is currently doing in the scene. Now, not only is it doing my avatar, but in multi-user, it's doing the other avatar's movement and coordinating them into my scene so I can see them move also. So this is used by us and the multi-user environment, and it tells it what to do. So move avatar is both our avatar and multi-user. Okay, and that's in the core file, those pieces. Now, other functions that they call, I didn't change anything. I didn't change anything. Okay, I don't want to go change some at this point in time. The next big file that you're going to see in this prime is this common file. This is my drop all basic coding, anything that the core file calls, anything that needs to be in the browsing level of any user using the site is in this common file. This is a pretty big file, but at the same time, it has the core. This is used by admin and by browsing because both are loaded when you load admin, but it is the core file. So this is where you're going to find all the key things to what you're doing using JavaScript when you're using the program. First thing is, you'll notice I define two functions here. dget is document get element by ID. You're going to see this all throughout my code. I just want you to know I defined it in here because I didn't want to spell document.getElement by ID every single time I needed it, but D with a capital G for get can still remind me it's document get element by ID. So dget and then whatever name it is means I've already done that. I put those in with the function WTW in front of it. This is the prototype, and then it loads up as capital WTW when it actually loads the prototype, the function. So WTW is what we need everywhere it works. And you can use dget by itself without it or with WTW, and it works. Now, everything else, I do logging, which is actual console log, but I added the ability to set a color so I can make things stand out whenever I need them. That's just a little fun thing. Capital WTW period log, and you can write things to the console log. Just put what you want to write, and then comma, and then pick a color, and it'll automatically do that color. Okay, so the rest of this, I'm not going to walk through this file right now, but we have everything from our getJSON calls, which are asynchronous, and then we have all kinds of things. We can load